Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Career Week and to our International Business Panel. Thank you for coming. We've got a group of 4 panelists who I will ask to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes, all of whom have extensive international experience and I think are going to provide you this afternoon with a really interesting perspective on careers in this area. A couple of housekeeping things. We have to tell you where the emergency exit is. So 2 over the wings, 1. Come on, that was a great joke. 1 here. If an emergency, you run over me and keep on going. If you've taken courses from me, you know that I really hate cell phones. So please either put them away or put them on mute and don't look at them for the next hour and 15 minutes. We'll have a period for questions at the end of the panel. I'm going to ask each panelist a number of set questions which they will answer, and then we'll have a period towards the end for your questions, okay? So if you have any, please save them up till the end of the afternoon. And finally, this panel is Learning Passport eligible. Miriam, who's at the back, wave Miriam, will stamp your passports at the end of the session, okay? So you have to stay for the whole session. Nobody leaves. All right, let's go. I'm going to ask the very first question is to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, their position, and their organization. Probably some of them you're not familiar with the company organization that we work with. And so I'll ask Trish Tully to start, please.
Sure. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? All right. My name is Trish Tully. I work as the VP Marketing and Sales for Survival Systems Limited, just in Woodside Oceans Industry Park in Dartmouth. And we're a small company that's been around for over 35 years. Our primary product line relates to training simulation. So we build simulators. The premier product that we build is a replica of a helicopter. And because helicopters are top heavy, that's where the engines are located, when they hit the water, they tend to invert, roll over, and sink very rapidly. So the product that we build is called a modular egress training simulator, and we hoist it with a gantry system above a pool of water. We then lower it, it rolls, inverts, and starts to submerge, and we train people how to get out of that helicopter ditching scenario. Okay?
Thank you. Amy Bray.
So I'm the manager of the International Education Center here at the Mount, and we're responsible for providing programs and services, opportunities for international students and for students who want to have an international experience. That can be here on campus, or that can be by going to one of our partner institutions for a summer program, a term, or a year. Describing my position, because I do manage a team of individuals. I work in a lot of areas, a lot of collaboration, a lot of areas. So whether it's with the English language learning programs, with immigration advising and program development, those are things I'm certainly collaborating on with my team. And on my own, I'm doing a lot of work on agreements, and for those, whether we're partnering with international institutions or scholarship programs, a lot of kind of legal work falls under my portfolio.
Sheila Nunn.
Hi everybody, so my name is Sheila and my company is East Coast Language College, and my role there is I'm the president and the CEO. Which sounds pretty fancy, doesn't it, really? But what does that mean? It really means that I do a lot of the things that maybe other people don't want to do. When you get to that title, you think you're going to be able to sit back and read your newspaper and, you know, plan your own day, but usually what happens is it gets hijacked by a lot of other people. But basically my role is to kind of do the strategic planning for the company. It's also to make sure we have a vision and we have values that we work to. I'm obviously responsible for the financial piece to make sure we can make money and pay our bills. And I'm also involved in kind of the industry part. So not just our school, but I'm involved with Edunova, which is the Nova Scotia part of it, which Wendy will talk about, but also involved with Languages Canada, which is our national association as well. So I'm kind of working in the company, but kind of also trying to get involved in making sure that our industry is noticed by government and we get things done, which can be kind of challenging. Yeah.
Thank you. And last but not least, Wendy Luther.
Thank you, and thank you, Sheila. I'm Wendy Luther. I'm the president and CEO of Edunova Cooperative Limited, and I have beside me one of my esteemed board members, in Sheila Nunn. Edunova is the association that promotes Nova Scotia's education and training expertise internationally. So we are the association that is owned by all 10 of our universities, our 13 campus community college system, public and private language, and public and private K-12. And we focus our efforts on what is difficult or impossible for any one institution to do on their own, mainly in the areas of collaborative international student recruitment and collaborative international student retention here in our province post-graduation. We are on any given week running initiatives in those two areas. Last week, I was at Languages Canada conference presenting on a panel with Sheila in terms of the kind of the future of international education in Canada. We had a delegation of 8 of our universities and schools in the Ukraine with our director of recruitment and marketing, and today had the pleasure of meeting with the Ukrainian ambassador, the Canadian ambassador to the Ukraine to further our efforts. And we also, with our post-secondary partners, developed the Study and Stay suite of programs and are very excited to be working with them again for another fantastic BEST conference. That was originally, that conference for international students was originally developed here at the Mount with a partnership between the Mount and NSCC, and then through partnership with Edunova expanded throughout the province. And we will have north of 250 international students participating at Dalhousie on Saturday. At SMU. Last year it was Dal. Thank you very much, Amy, on the organizing committee. I apparently am not on the organizing committee.
I just want everyone to go to SMU.
Everybody go to SMU
Go
on
to
Saturday.
the conference at
And in terms of stakeholders, as Sheila mentioned, a lot of crossover. I work primarily with the presidents of our member organizations, and the presidents make up our board of directors, a subset of the presidents. I also work with government at all levels, but particularly at the deputy minister, executive director, deputy minister level, whereas my team members would have inroads at all other levels of government. In my previous roles, before joining Edunova almost 6.5 years ago, I was trade executive at Nova Scotia Business Inc., responsible for export and services, which is where I met Trish back in the day, as well as I was the representative for Nova Scotia for the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. And prior to that, I worked as a trade consultant with the World Trade Centers Association. So if you have any questions as we go forward about any of those roles, because they're all a little bit different.
Great, thanks, Wendy. Second question, we'll start with Amy on this, and Wendy answered it quite nicely. How has your education experience led you to your current position?
So my education really focused, I was involved in the arts, and so I was really interested in learning or understanding how we learn, ways of knowing, systems of knowing, historical underpinnings of our institutions, in particular the legal system, literacy, and book history and print culture. And here we say education experience like they're the same thing, but really for me, I also in my personal life had lived abroad for quite a while and was always engaged with the international initiatives, either at the university level or in my community. Or in my family. And so I knew that when I had decided not to stay in academia anymore, that I was going to be looking for something that would build on that experience that I had. I started getting involved in student politics. I worked as a staff member in student politics, and that's where I got exposure to student services, student affairs, and knew that I wanted to build a career in student services. From there, I focused on academic advising and career advising in both my volunteer work and in my paid employment. And before I knew it, opportunities became available in the International Center at Dalhousie, and I took a few different positions there in that role. And I loved it so much that I feel really grateful to have built on that by coming here to the Mount to manage a team of people doing various elements of what I had done in the past in a few different universities. So it's really nice to see all that coming together. While I will mention, while my education was primarily in the arts for both my undergraduate and my master's degree that I took second, I did do a third master's degree at the university or at Dalhousie after my one in University of Toronto, because I knew that I was going to need more foundational training in policy development, program development and analysis, as well as, I'm looking at Wendy there, as well as how our government structures work in order to be able to deliver the services and programs that we do for the people in Nova Scotia and in Canada. So I did that MPA degree part-time while I was working full-time in the international student area.
Thank you. Sheila?
Okay, I always shudder when I see this question because my path to where I got to now is non-traditional. I didn't go to university. Oh my God, what a shock. How could I possibly run a company if I didn't go to university? I know, and I'm not supposed to say that to all you university people. When I was really young, I wanted to be a teacher, but then my parents decided to move to Canada when I was 15, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to be in Canada. So I ran away from home when I was 17, ran back to England, and I worked on archaeological excavations for a while, and then I worked in business for 10 years, which I really loved. And then my husband and I threw in our jobs, and we went to the Caribbean, and we worked on a charter yacht for 5 years. And then we thought, oh, I don't think we're going to go back to England. What should we do? Maybe we'll come to Canada. But then I really decided that part of the thing that I liked when I worked in business was I really enjoyed training junior people. I really liked that teaching piece. So before we came to Canada, I did a TESOL course so I could teach English as a second language. And then when we came to Canada, we kind of moseyed about a bit, thought we were going to Vancouver, ended up here. And so I started my own tutoring business when I came here, and I tutored students, second language students. And then I kind of got to know some people who were opening a school, and so I kind of fell in with them, and I thought that sounds like a great thing to do, why not? And so I started as a teacher with them, and then I moved on to become the academic director. And then as we grew and we needed to expand, I took on the role of Director of Business Development. And then our Director of Marketing had a baby and decided that she didn't want to come back to work anymore. So I combined the roles and became Director of Business Development and Marketing and started traveling around the world. And then when one of our business partners decided to retire, we thought it was time to kind of rejig the company to make it a little bit stronger. And we decided to have a role of President and CEO, which was back in 2012, I think. And so because of all the different roles that I had held, it made sense for me to become the President and CEO. So that's how I got to where I am today. So non-traditional, but I think, you know, entrepreneurship is kind of in your genes somewhere. My dad is an entrepreneur and did crazy things his whole life. It's like, I don't know how to do this, but I think I can probably do it if I just apply my brain to it. And I've always been the same. When people say, can you do this? It's like, I don't know, but I'll give it a go. Let's see if I can make it work. Yeah.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you. So not not quite as windy. I did come through the university system, but not in the area where I ended up. My undergrad from UBC is in psychology, just because I went right out of high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd taken a psych course in grade 11 and it was an easy option, so off I went. But I had no intention of pursuing that at a master's level or working as a psychologist. So it was really the move. You know, in the interim, I did a certificate in public relations. I almost came to the Mount from Vancouver to do a second undergrad, and at the last minute decided not to, but I ended up here anyway. Here I am. There's still time. And so I ended up moving here because my husband, fiance at the time, was from here. He wanted to move back. So here I was. And just through some of his family connections, I was very lucky to receive 2 job offers on the same day. My last job in Vancouver was in advertising. But after my undergrad, I traveled around South America for 3.5 months, and I really think that was probably, of all of my education, the most impactful in terms of my career path. I learned more in that 3.5 months probably than I did at 4 years of undergrad. No offense to UBC, but you know, just really that experiential learning, which at the time was not a part of, and study abroad was really not a part of academic studies. This is in the 90s, where now it's so part and parcel. So a bit of a plug there for experiential learning opportunities and study abroad, which I had to do thanks to my parents and their financing after my undergrad. So when I moved here, and I was very, very lucky to kind of network my way into 2 job opportunities. One was in advertising, running a production department for a marketing firm, which was more aligned with what I'd been doing. But it was my life dream to be in international business, and I had no reason, like I had no business being in international business, other than I camped around South America. But I was very lucky to get this job at the World Trade Center through, again, networking, which we'll talk later. Through networks, I found out about the job. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even known about it. And got the job there as trade consultant. And immediately, you know, a month on the job, I was in Brazil promoting a major conference we were hosting here in Nova Scotia. And after that, I was able to travel to some very interesting locations and meet some very, very, very interesting people. They also put me through my Certified International Trade designation, which was very helpful in terms of getting that foundational kind of learning background behind assisting exporters. From there, I moved to Nova Scotia Business Inc., which is our province's economic development agency, also working in export development. And NSBI was very, very supportive and a wonderful employer. They helped put me through my executive MBA at St. Mary's University, as well as at that time, they only offered it once, but I was very blessed to be a part of it, offered a 1.5-year leadership program for eight of the staff members. So that kind of between that academic MBA piece and then the leadership piece, and then that led me to my role now as president CEO at Edgenova. I have to say, when I first moved here, and for those of you in the room who perhaps aren't from here and don't have your own networks, I didn't either, which is one of the big thought process behind the development of Study and Stay. I had to rely on my husband's family just not to get me a job. I certainly had to interview, but I wouldn't have even heard about it had I not had an introduction to the people who were hiring. And that's how I heard about and secured my first job. But from my first to second and second to third, I knew everybody on the hiring panel. So once you get that first opportunity here, there's a huge amount of opportunities here in Nova Scotia for your career path. But it is about getting that foot in the door.
Thanks, Wendy. Trish?
I'm not sure if the yearbook still exists. Does it?
Okay.
In 1984, when I graduated from Muscatava Rural High School in the middle of nowhere, I had written in that book that I was going to join the military. And I ended up actually serving the military for the last 25 years in my current position. by selling our equipment to militaries all around the world. But instead of doing that, I didn't have the confidence. I didn't think I could go to university. I wasn't smart enough. So I wanted to make money. I wanted to move out of the house and have my own apartment. So I took a straight path to earning income by taking a one-year secretarial course. It was the accelerated course at Dartmouth Regional Vocational School. They offered a 2-year and a 1-year. So I took the 1 year, following the steps of my mom, who was a secretary. And my dad was disappointed. And he said, you know what? Secretaries are a dime a dozen. So if that's what you're going to do, you're going to have to be the best in class. So that's what I did. And I was hired before I finished the program. And I won awards in the program. And that's how I started this career that's been, running along quite nicely for 25 years. Like Wendy says, I think the experience that you gain, no matter what you're doing in your personal life or in your professional life, that's the core. The wrapping around that is your university and your Forum for International Trade Training, your Harvard courses that you take, your undergrad, your certificate programs, your masters, all of those things, that's the wrapping around it. But the experience that you gain and the things you learn that you like and that you dislike on your route, on your path, that's what really sort of leads you and gets you stabilized on a path. So after I jumped around from place to place because I was very efficient and I was very bored, there wasn't enough work. Right? I mean, I would ask for more work. I'm done. Can I have more work? I eventually took a transfer with the Federal Business Development Bank to Toronto. And from there, I had saved enough money and decided that I wanted to travel around Australia. Again, somewhat like Wendy, put yourself out there and see what shakes out from it. So I did that over 1991. And originally, one of my girlfriends at a workplace encouraged me to take a university course. And that happened to be here at the Mount. Probably in 1986 or 85, Niels Nielsen. And that was the start of my part-time undergrad. And I went between part-time to full-time, switching back and forth between part-time and full-time work. Eventually, when I came back from Australia, I went full-time to university. I went to Prince Edward Island and lived there with the bank for a year, but I wanted to come back to Nova Scotia. And I happened to be interviewed for a job as executive assistant for the owner of Survival Systems. So Survival Systems is a small company. It was only 20. And when you join a small company like that, you do everything. It doesn't matter what your role, what your title on your business card is. You may take out the garbage tomorrow. You might be sitting in a meeting hosting Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade training people who are trying to get experience and know about your business here in little old Nova Scotia because they're deploying to Dubai tomorrow and they need to drum up business for Canada. So having been in that position and working very closely with the owner of the company, when the sales and marketing department fell apart, basically, who was left standing? I was. So I naturally went into and was working in that position because the president and CEO of Survival Systems Limited was the sales guy. Right? That's what he was doing. And thus and therefore, that's what I was doing. Eventually, the company started to stabilize and, we started to actually generate some sales going from like under $1 million a year to over $12 million. So that's sort of the history of where I've come from. But I'll tell you what, I'm never leaving. Why? Because I'm never bored. You can't, there's no way in the world you'll ever run out of work in a small dynamic business that's exporting. And the experiences that you gain just meeting people and traveling to different, everything, is noticeably different. It's fun, it's exciting. I don't know, it's just been a really, really good ride, and for anybody who wants to get into international business, I really encourage you to do so. Whichever route gets you there. You know, you start with your undergrad in psychology, you start with wherever you know, just coming to this session and hearing, you know, 4 people who deal internationally on a day-to-day basis. It's exciting, it's fun, and I encourage you to do that.
Thank you. Those 4 really interesting stories. Thank you. Next, we'll start with Sheila. Double-barrel question. What do you like about your work, and what do you dislike?
Okay. This was a tricky one when I saw this. I thought, oh man, I don't know. I kind of like my days generally. But okay, let's try and think about it. What I really like, I mean, I was a teacher and I'm passionate about the learning piece and I'm passionate about our students. So one thing I really like is to see the students every day, chat to them. And my favorite day of the term is the graduation. We have graduations every 10 weeks. And to see the students graduating, to me, that is the best thing. They have finally achieved the language that they need, and they're going on to maybe Mount St. Vincent or St. Mary's. So many of them go on to university and college here in Nova Scotia. And so that, to me, is the highlight of it. Sometimes we get a bit bogged down when we're running a company with all the kind of nitty-gritty stuff, and we kind of forget why we do what we do. And so by seeing the graduation, it reminds me, yeah, this is why we're here. This is what's important. You know, all the other stuff is just detail stuff. So that's really great. The other thing I guess I really like about it is the sort of unpredictability of what's going to happen. I don't really know what I'm going to find in my inbox when I come in the morning. It could be somebody from Brazil asking if we do teacher training. They've got a group of 50 people. Can we, you know, train these people? It could be information about a trade mission to Colombia, and I'm trying to think, do we want to go to Colombia or not? We just never know what's going to come up. This morning I had a meeting with the ambassador, Canadian ambassador to the Ukraine. So he came to our school and we were chatting about how can we get, you know, better traction in Ukraine. Last week I was at the conference with Wendy, so chatting to trade commissioners and just kind of talking about where's our industry going as a whole, where are the opportunities going to be in the future. So kind of bigger picture stuff. And because I'm an entrepreneur at heart, the other thing I love about it is the sort of unexpected opportunities that crop up. You know, you've got to be able to see them and go, ooh, that sounds interesting. Never done that before. Yeah, I think we could probably pull that together and go for it. So it's those kind of unexpected things that I really like. So if you've been listening really carefully, you can see that the things that I like are all the kind of exciting, new. People tell me I'm always after the new and shiny. And so what kinds of things don't I like? Well, it's kind of more of the mundane stuff. If my other directors say, oh, I think we need to get together to have a discussion about the homestay policies. It's like, oh, no, I don't want to be there. Can't you guys just figure it out yourselves? I hate that kind of detail stuff. So it's important that you also recognize what your strengths are. You know, if we were all people who wanted new and shiny, it wouldn't be a very good company because no one would want to do the detail stuff. So you have to have people who work with you as part of your team that are really good at that stuff. And you need to be able to say to them, you know what, this isn't my strength because I'm going to start drifting off in this conversation. So, you know, you need to say this is kind of, you know, you take the lead on this. Just because I'm the president and CEO doesn't mean to say I take the lead on everything, because I know this is not my strength. You take the lead, I'll listen. If it makes sense to me, yeah, go for it, right? So I hate that kind of detail-y stuff. Because we're international business, all of our relationships are long distance. So our agents, we have agents around the world who recruit students for us and send them to our school. But you can't pop out and have a coffee with them. You can't pop out and have lunch with them. And to me, relationship building is really key to everything you do, whether it's the networking to find positions, to find contracts, to find opportunities, or to get them to send students to you. So it's like having a long-distance love affair, really. I mean, yeah, okay, you can communicate by Skype and by WhatsApp and all these things, but it's not the same as being in the same room as someone. So I find that very challenging because we don't get together as often as we would like to, I would like to, because frankly you just can't afford to keep flying around the world, halfway around the world to China, Vietnam, Japan, Korea to go and have lunch with someone. So I find that a little bit challenging. And the other thing I guess I'm not wild about are all the HR issues. You know, we are a small company. We have perhaps 30 people working for us. But, you know, HR issues come up all the time. And when we're into the he said, she said kind of stuff, that's also when I kind of glaze over as well. But, you know, it's part of doing business and part of running a successful business. And I feel as long as we've got our values set, which we have, everyone knows them, then we can soon identify if a person is a fit in the company. A person can be very competent at their job, but if they don't have the right values to fit with our company, then we're not going to stay together for very long. So yeah, I like the new and shiny, not so much on the detail-y type stuff.
Thanks, Sheila. Wendy?
Thanks, Michael. Same answer as Sheila. I think that I like a lot of things about my job, and I have, we're even a smaller team than Sheila's. We're 7, but we also have the board and numerous committees that kind of extends our reach through our active member volunteers. One of the things I love the most about my job is the same as Sheila, the student success. We don't run a school ourselves, so for us, the success that we see are students that have either been recruited through our initiatives or have been in the study and stay program, and to see them graduate and to secure meaningful employment in their field or to start a business, that's really what keeps us going, because ultimately that is what all this effort is about. It's to bring more students to come and experience Nova Scotia as a study destination, and to encourage more of them to stay and build their lives here post-graduation. So seeing that actually happen beyond just the theory of the programming to these are individual lives that are being positively affected by our work is very motivating. The second for me would be that the relationships that are created in our sector in particular. And I felt this way also when I worked in other aspects of international business, such as our network created through the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank, or in the world of trade. International education is a $200 billion a year industry worldwide. And I'm not a recruiter. If you really like to travel, I encourage you to look at international student recruitment, because no one is on the road more and longer than those individuals. But my travel is mainly around, I know there's a question around that, it's about going to presenting at conferences and representing Nova Scotia's interests with stakeholders around the world. And you do create meaningful and lasting relationships with individuals who are really creating new thought and trying things that have never been done before around the world. And so to collaborate with these individuals and to work with them and create new projects with them is also very motivating for me. And that brings me to my third favorite thing, is creating something from nothing. So some of these programs, like the Study and Stay that has won national and international awards, nobody in the world, it turned out, had done something just like that. So to work with all of our post-secondary partners, as well as language in K-12, because they're represented through EduNova's board, and our government partners, both provincially and federally, to come up with something that has never been tried anywhere and then has been very celebrated I absolutely love it. And we're continuously looking for what is that next big thing that nobody has done, and that is in the spirit of working where it's difficult or impossible for any one institution to do on their own. Where can we really raise the bar on certain issues around advocacy for study permits, which is some initiative Sheila and I are working on right now with our Federal Association Languages Canada, looking on some innovative marketing approaches and other initiatives that you can really say, wow, like, is anybody doing this? No? Okay, how can we be the first to do it, and how can we pull together smart individuals and motivated individuals to really make a difference in our sector?
Thank you.
Oh, what I don't like. Same as Sheila, but I'm very blessed to have fantastic office manager who loves detail, loves it. And last week she was sharing with me the 25-page document she just created on business continuity, which we was very excited about. It looked fantastic. Really look forward to reading it. And she's very motivated by this. So as much as it is lovely to spend time with like-minded people, and when we're out traveling or even here and we're sitting around and perhaps enjoying a beverage, coming up with these really great ideas in your own workspace, it's very important to have a variety of strengths and views and preferences, because a lot would not get done if we were all oriented the same way I was, in terms of more of those big ideas, kind of big picture thinking. So yes, in the weeds. Prefer not to spend too much time there.
Fair enough. Thanks, Wendy. Trish?
Basically, I think I said it. Variety is what I really like. I enjoy it. And whether physically or just interacting with clients around the world, traveling the globe every day. You know, I probably touch 15 countries a day just by dealing with our clients or pursuing new business with potential clients, that kind of thing. And the thing that I don't, and the other thing I really, really like is when we're successful signing a multi-million-dollar contract. That's always a highlight, because it takes us several years lead time to sell, you know, couple $1 million worth of equipment and services. So that's very exciting. It's a huge team effort when we land a contract like that. In terms of what I dislike, and I'll be cruel to our clients here for a moment, is when, much like government tenders, the lowest price is the driving factor. And you can't, no matter how much education, you cannot make them see the value of what they're getting, you know. So that's very frustrating. And sometimes another thing that I dislike is it can be extremely chaotic. Along with all of that those shiny things and the excitement of the variety, sometimes it can become completely chaotic. And you just need to bear down and try to manage through that.
Great. Thank you. Amy?
So when you're last, you get to echo your others. But no, some of the things I think that drive us all in education, no matter what area we're working in, I think is always going to be the students. So, you know, today, because I'm preparing for the BEST conference, I pre-interviewed some of our student panelists. And, you know, one of them I hired for a student assistant position in our office, and somebody really advocated for him, and you know, I didn't know what she saw in him because I could barely understand what he was saying, but she saw it, and now he's going to be a student panelist, and he's an entrepreneur, and he's doing really, really well, and I'm just so proud that I got to meet him at the very beginning and just help him launch into the things that he's doing now. And over again, that's my experience. So whether it's somebody who comes in to talk about studying abroad or having an international experience, they'll always talk about who they are, their ideas, what they want to do, and it's part of my job to get them there. They're going to do it on their own, but I get to find the opportunities for them and set them up. Here's a scholarship program. Here's a new agreement. You told me you wanted to do this one thing 2 years ago. Do you still want to? Because it's here. So for me, you know, when I run into somebody on the street and they're not a kid anymore. It's like, wow, you're doing all these awesome things. That's what I love. Now, in order to be able to do that, and this is where the echoing comes in, I love to innovate. And to a fault. So you do all these things in your PD and, you know, what are your strengths, what are your skills? I could just develop a whole program, launch it, and just be like, I'm done. Okay. Somebody else can run it. And that's where the details and the micromanaging comes in. So, within all the innovation is collaboration. So I like to flesh out ideas out loud. I like to brainstorm. I like to debate about things and try to figure things out. And then from that, I'll create sort of a program or a new thing, like the new and shiny definitely drives me as well. But I don't mind the details if it's within the context of innovating. So if there is a new policy that needs to be created because it's not there, I'll look at all the policy pieces. What are the drivers? Do the research. What are the things that are going to get people to accept and implement this policy? Where is it going to go wrong? I love to dive into a really big project like that and focus on it. So what I don't like is micromanaging. If I'm working on something that's really cool, really innovative, it's going to be the next awesome thing for students and it's going to make a big difference. I don't want to micromanage somebody else's project on the team that they've started to do. I'm happy to help them, but if I find out that that's not progressing because I wasn't there every step of the hand-holding way, it's just not me. So for me, my team needs to be also independent and willing to take initiative and get moving on some things that really, really drive them. So I think that's all I can add there.
Perfect, thank you. We'll start with Wendy. This next question maybe duplicates a little bit, but what do you find most challenging, most difficult about your work?
I think like all of the panelists here, our work is very, very diverse. Challenging good is often we're presented with a task, such as we were asked to organize the education component of the Atlantic Growth Strategy mission to China in the fall, and it was kind of envisioned that all the college and university presidents in the region were going to go with the premiers and the federal ministers to China. And at first, I was honest, I'm like, is this thing actually going to go? But it was going, so we were tasked with making something meaningful out of it and getting everyone on side. And in the end, 11 presidents plus their plus ones who would be VP academic or other dignitaries joined, and it was a massive mission and by all accounts very successful. But just pulling on your networks and your resources to come up with something from nothing. Most challenging, maybe in the bad category, would be when you're running any organization, you have competitors, perhaps if you're a private business, naysayers, perhaps if you're more of a not-for-profit or public, and so being very confident in what it is that you're doing, the value that you bring. If you are hearing, it's often not to your face, but behind that people maybe don't fully understand what it is that you're working on or why it's important. And in my 6.5 years at Genova, that has really been minimized over time, and how that challenge is minimized, whether you're starting an initiative on campus or whether you're running for campus or student council or starting your own business, is through communication and through making your stakeholders aware as possible about the value that you're bringing, and how they can get more involved. And that's been a successful approach.
Okay, Trish.
Jumping right on Wendy's, one of her last words was communications. And I don't mean to say that I find linguistics or barriers from different languages most challenging. I'm talking about basic communications 101. Inside of Survival Systems Limited, inside of our house, as well as when dealing with clients, vendors, you name it. If you haven't taken a business communications course, and just for fun this summer you'd like to, it will do you a world of good. Why? Because often people overcomplicate the communication. You just need to break it down, keep it simple. You've probably heard before, just keep it simple, stupid. KISS. And very clear, precise, to the point. Also, what happens often is that there's no confirmation that the communication has been understood. You just put it out there, and you expect people to understand it. But especially when you're dealing with language barriers and different cultural aspects of doing business internationally, it's very worthwhile up front confirming that the message you're sending is in fact the message that's been received. Another thing about communications is the follow-up. You know, you don't just send it out there and wait for somebody to get back to you. If they haven't gotten back to you, you need to ensure that they receive the message. Like, pick up the phone if the email isn't working or whatever. So I would say if you can manage communications, if you get on top of that, then the road is going to be much easier, no matter what you're doing in your personal or professional life. So I would say outside of that, in the industry that I work in, it's oil and gas, it's military. So it's a male-dominated industry, and that is challenging. Challenging where I haven't been allowed to make a presentation on a U.S. Navy military base to the Egyptian Air Force. Unacceptable. Not allowed. Can't be done. Right? So I had an airline ticket lined up in a burqa. I was going to Saudi Arabia about 10 years ago. And the agent that I was dealing with, he was Egyptian. We had the meetings lined up. My passport was in Ottawa for the entrance visa, etc. And after repeatedly asking, because I had my suspicions, I repeatedly asked, and just before the agent left to go to the airport, I said, "Tell me, Radwan, will I get to meet with the military?" I said, "Come on, am I going to be able to get onto the military base?" "No." He put his head down. I said, "Okay. Are they going to come to the hotel to meet with me?" "No." I said, "So I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia and I'm going to sit inside of a hotel room and do what?" "Well, I don't know. It'll be good that you're there because you've been the front person the whole time, but you're not even allowed to go and eat by yourself. You have to be with a group of women if you go outside of your room." I said, "See you later." Not doing that. Chose two men who instead took my place and went and did the business. So these are minority challenges, I suppose you could say, right? Where there's just certain places in the world that you cannot, as a female, do business. And outside of communications, that's all.
Thank you. Amy?
For me, the biggest challenge in my day-to-day work is always going to be working interculturally. And I don't mean positively or negatively. So it comes back to communications in some instances. Sometimes it's me thinking about, why is this program not being received? Why is there no take-up? Sometimes it's about conflict, students' dissatisfaction with a service or with a staff member, and sometimes it's about the work is just not being done, or how a student is coming in for advising and how they're presenting themselves, and I feel offended. Why do I feel offended? Again, sometimes we're talking about our institutional partnerships, and I just don't know why a partner wants to do things a certain way, and I have to step back and think really carefully about cultural norms and accepted ways of actually performing your business transactions in your relationships. So it's hugely challenging, and I don't think it's negative at all, because it's really interesting, and it keeps me really engaged, and it keeps me really attentive to my own what I'm doing and my own interactions and my own behavior, and I actually love it, and it's one of the things that I consider most special about the kind of work that I do. Another challenge that I would point out, and it was already mentioned in another question, but I do find the chaos and the go, and then not enough hours in a day, and if I don't leave right now, my brain is going to explode, kind of like, that's really, really challenging. And so that's an element when you go into your careers. I think everybody needs to learn how to do their own self-care in that way and deal with when enough is just enough, because you really could clone yourself and become 2, 3, 4 people. And sometimes that can be really overwhelming, and that's a challenge that sometimes I deal with. Yeah.
Thank you. Sheila?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges when you're working in international business, as we are, our students are coming to us from all around the world, is we really have no control over the risks that we are exposed to. People have often said to me, you know, when I've been at various business meetings, so what's your risk strategy? You know, and I'm like, well, we hope for the best by diversifying. I mean, really, we have to diversify, and that's the only way we can control risk, because, you know, we are immediately affected when things go wrong around the world. So we were doing quite nicely getting students from Venezuela a few years ago, and then President Chavez died. No students, all stopped. How do you control against the death of a president? You don't, right? We have no control over these things. There was a Korean crash back in the early 90s. We had no Korean students. Saudi Arabia is a little bit more recent. Many of you will remember that. You know, the government decided to stop funding students and so on, changed all sorts of rules and regulations. That affected many schools across the country. So all these things are out of our control, and there's nothing we can put in place to stop those things happening in those countries. All we can do is try and spread ourselves as thin as possible and make sure we are in as many countries as possible. So if this one goes down, we still have something else to fall back on. But as I said, it's not like popping down to Bedford to have a cup of coffee with someone. It's getting on a plane and traveling halfway around the world. You're looking at a, you know, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 trip to go and meet people at a minimum. So these are all expenses that we have to incur in order to keep up the international business. So one of the challenges is it's expensive to run an international business if you want to maintain those relationships. So that's that, sort of more, that's a bigger challenge. And I guess one of the other challenges that we're seeing more and more of now is students are becoming more demanding of what they want, but they don't see the value. You mentioned earlier about the value, and people want the Jaguar, but they want to pay for a secondhand Chevy. So this is a challenge for us because, you know, if you want to come and study in a, in a class of 6 to 8 or 8 to 10 students, but you want to pay the same as if you're going to be in a class with 25 students, it's not possible. The financials don't work that way. So those are a couple of challenges that we have.
Great. Thanks, Sheila. Here's a more practical question. So you get up in the morning, you shower, you have your breakfast, you go to the office. What do? No? It's Trish's start? Yeah.
So typically my answer is fairly short because there's no such thing as arriving at the office. That's a luxury. I'm on 24/7, 365. Especially today with all of the means of being able to be reached and our clients being upside down all over the world, different time zones, etc., etc. So typically I'll wake up sometime after 4 in the morning and I'm linked in through a team viewer program on a laptop at home. And that is the first thing I do is I open that up and I tunnel in to my work computer. So it just doesn't, like, I'm sorry. Amy was saying, you really need to manage in self-care because it can consume you, right? Just so happens I love it. So that is my life, right? And so, no, there's no typical work day. The first thing, though, is open up that computer, check the email, check the berry, see if most important of order is a phone call. If the phone has rung, it's very important. Because mostly it's, text, email, other social media, or means of. When traveling, okay, so when traveling, the day doesn't get any better because in advance you're prepping for the deployment, the meetings that you're going to meet for. So you need to catch up on everything that is your routine run of the day. Prep yourself for those meetings and work that you're going to be doing on the road. While you're on the road, maintain everything that's going on a day-to-day basis, right? And then at the end of each of your meeting days, do the debrief and figure out, the strategy of what you're doing next. And you get to look forward to coming home to catch up on all that stuff that you couldn't quite do while you were on the road. All of the follow-on work for the meetings that you've just had around the world. And maintain. So it's pretty much a little rat wheel. But if you got the passion in your belly, right? Those I don't consider challenges or negatives. I'm motivated by that. That, you know, if I can answer somebody's question in Australia at 4 a.m. when they're still at work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I love that, because we don't waste a day waiting for me to get back. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, that's our society. So coming to the office, it doesn't start when you come to the office, but I do have a little system of things that I do. Because again, working internationally and time zones, the first thing I do, I wake up what came in overnight and I check those emails through. I try not to do any emails though, because I will get really involved in them and lose track of the day and the morning. So I see what came in overnight, and then I flip to my calendar and I see what do I have going in today and how many of these things am I going to actually be able to focus on. Then life, children, blah, blah, blah. And then when you get to the office, it's always voicemails first, and then again, then you go into your emails and get going. That's why I don't really love having meetings very first thing, because a lot of times if things come in overnight, if you leave them to the end of your day, then that can really interrupt the flow across the waters or in different time zones. So that's my work morning, or how do I get going here in Canada. I didn't print off the questions. But when I travel outside of the country, again, there is a lot more, I feel like there's a lot of strategizing that you have to do, because things will get thrown in, another meeting will get added, something will get canceled. You need to be prepared, because often you're proposing things that are, you need, again, the long distance collaboration, so you need to have an impact, you need to get buy-in really, really quickly, and then you may only have this one half-an-hour time slot to brainstorm something that has been troubling you and your collaborative partner for a really long time, so you need to be on your game. I also, though, include, we were talking about our day outside of the country, I do, probably because I do so much one-on-one work with students and cross-culturally, I do make sure that I include some learning while I'm in other countries, to make sure that I am experiencing their culture, because I do feel that informs our transactions or the work that we do and the negotiations and agreements that we make. So again, I'm not out doing a whole lot of touristy things all the time, but I am definitely taking the time when I go to dinner that I'm watching people, how they're interacting with their families, with their friends, the things around me. You know, times of day when I think this is a key time to be going out and going shopping, and actually I notice, no, actually it's 3 hours later than that. Because it does help me understand where I am and who I'm dealing with a little bit better, and for me, that's critical in really good relationship building. So even though there's a lot to get done on these really expensive trips that we have to, we have to deliver, I try to incorporate that element of learning into every trip that I do, at least in some conscious level.
Thank you. Sheila?
The old Sheila used to tear into work. Yeah, she'd been checking emails at home before. She'd tear into work, go straight to her office, busily doing her emails and doing everything. And then a few years ago, I thought, you know what, I can't carry on like this. This is nuts, and it's not very good for my team either, because they were also thinking, man, we can't come up to breathe, we can't talk to people because she doesn't, so that must be the way to do things here. So I thought I've got to just calm down and figure out how I'm going to manage this a little bit more sensibly. So yes, I do check emails at home before I go to work still. And I do try to meditate as well before I go to work. So I try to do 10 or 15 minutes of meditation. If I don't manage it, the first thing I do when I get in, after I've done the thing I'll tell you in a minute, is I shut my door and I stick a note on and I say, I'll see you in 20 minutes. And I just sit and I just get my head together before I start my day. And that has helped me immensely, because it actually helps me to plan, really, to start off on the right foot. But when I go into the office, the first thing I do is, as I click that door handle, I pause for a few seconds. And it's like, okay, I'm going to work now. And people are expecting to see me in a certain way. I'm the leader of this business, and they need to see me in a certain way. They don't want to see me running and go, oh my God, do you know what I've got to do today? I'll never get through it all. It's like, that's a really nice way to greet them in the morning. So I slow down, I take that breath, and then I walk in, and then the first thing I do is I walk all around and I say hello to everybody that's in the office, have a little chat to them, how are you, da-da-da-da-da. Then I go to my office. If I haven't done my meditation, I shut the door and I grab a few minutes to myself. When that's done, I look at my calendar. The first thing, what do I have on today? It's usually meetings. My average day is lots of different meetings. Might be phone meetings or meetings with Ed Genova or meetings with partners. And emails, of course. Emails are always there, but I try to kind of control those around the meetings. I feel I do my best work when I'm in the meetings, and because that's what I have to go for, to either help push things along or strategize on something. So a lot of meetings. But yeah, it's really that calming piece at the beginning. It sets me up correctly. And I also stopped reading emails before I went to bed. I used to look at them just before I got into bed. I'd say, I wonder if anything came in. And I'd look, and then it'd be like, oh my God, oh. And then would I sleep? No. You know, I'd have 3 hours sleep because all night my brain was going, oh my gosh, I got to get back to this. What are they going to do? Oh my goodness, this is a big problem. So I thought, you know what? I don't need to check at night. I need to be fresh in the morning so I can deal with this. So I don't check now. I just leave it, and I have a look in the morning. And you know what? The world hasn't ended, so I guess it's okay. And the traveling was exactly the same as Trish said. All that prep and continuing with things, exactly the same. So I just won't repeat it all.
Thank you. Wendy?
I always drink coffee in the morning. I don't know if anybody mentioned, like, you got to have some coffee. So very, similar, although I am sound asleep at 4, 5, 6, 7, like I would not, but I really commend your diligence. I am a big fan of sleep, and to Sheila's note in terms of creating boundaries, like Sheila, I spend a lot of time in meetings. I could be in meetings all day long, 7 days a week, which is I enjoy because you're interacting with people, you're building relationships, you're coming up with great ideas, but meetings tend to be work generating, not work solving or, so I have started the habit, at least internally with our own team, is bringing a laptop, and when something actually comes out, an action item, like we really need to email. So we really need to email Sheila and ask her about what we're going to do with this next step of this project, to email her right then and there in the meeting, so that we're not walking out of there with a whole massive to-do list that you're never going to get to because you're now going into another meeting, which is going to generate another massive to-do list. So also being disciplined, and I am occasionally good at this. I'm going to test it tomorrow morning, at actually scheduling time to work, like actual work, not going to meetings and having lovely coffee breaks with people isn't work. It is, but the actual, when am I going to write this proposal? I'm going to write it between 10 and 12, and trying to be disciplined to keep that space sacred. And I would imagine it would be analogous to when you're in exam period and you have to study, or you really have to get something done. You might want to chat with your friends. You might want to kind of work on something else. You might want to go to a fascinating talk on international careers. But when the rubber hits the road, you actually have to get this stuff done. And so being really disciplined about carving out that time for yourself and trying to keep it sacred. And that's where I need to work on, because if I got an email saying, hey, I'm in town, can you get together at 10? I'd say, absolutely. And then I would be working at night, because there's only so many hours in the day. And that's the thing with these jobs. One thing that makes it so fascinating for me is that there's never a same day, and nobody is ever, almost never is somebody telling you what you have to do and when you have to do it. You're creating all that. So, which is great, but it means then you have to create some structure on your creation. And I, like Amy, have young kids, and so if I am not diligent in the day of really getting the things that need to happen, it means I am doing it after 9 p.m. at night. And you can do that sometimes, or you can't do that all the time, because you will have no clean clothes, no dishes, no good sleep. So it's about creating some boundaries for yourself. On the road, I am almost always traveling with a large entourage of individuals, whether it be on a delegation or at a conference. So the days are very full and they're very long. But my adage is always, I can sleep when I get home. So for all the self-care, when you're here in your day-to-day, I always find that the most meaningful interactions are happening over dinner, over an evening beverage. That's where you actually learn what's really, really going on. And it was the same when I was traveling with business owners under my past roles. That's when you you actually get to know these individuals enough to support them, which was my role, as well as you create some meaningful relationships that next time you want to collaborate with someone or you need some assistance, or you want to make an introduction, this isn't just someone that you saw briefly in a boardroom. This is somebody that you've had some time to spend some time. And I've certainly had colleagues who, for whatever reason, are like, yeah, 5:30, bye, I'm going to watch a movie in my hotel room. To me, that's not really maximizing your time on the road at all. And exercise, everybody. Everybody has to exercise, I think, because that's what's going to keep you healthy and energetic to take on all of this work.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the time here. I've got several questions left. I'm going to ask one more and ask you to be brief. You've given wonderful answers here, but this is going to challenge your brevity skills. So I'll start with Amy. What do you see as the key skills needed to work in international business today?
First, passion, empathy, and adaptability. And I think empathy is maybe rivals passion. You have to really be thinking about others and be willing to engage with their perspective in order to actually deliver.
Yeah, I had pretty much same. Flexibility, good listening skills. Listen more than you talk. Another language is very helpful. And being perceptive.
Thank you. Oh, you really are exercising your brevity. Good for you.
Good students.
Yeah, thank you.
Say curiosity and adventurousness. Some of this is not for the faint of heart, as well as persistence. Doing business internationally is more difficult, really. The sales cycles are longer than doing business locally.
Okay. Trish.
I would say that you need to become a trusted advisor when you're building those relationships, when you're building clients. You need to ask, listen, understand, repeat until you have understood. In terms of your credibility and building your career path, if you say you're going to do something and you put a deadline on it, do it. Don't let people down. It is so discouraging to always hear people tell you what they're going to do by when they're going to do it, and then having to babysit them and follow up with them and chase them to see, like, what is the answer and why haven't you given it? Sure, if there's a legitimate excuse, then that's okay too, but that goes back to communication. You can't meet the deadline that you said you were going to do something by. Communicate back to the recipient of that message. Explain why. Not excuses, but a legitimate reason why you've missed the deadline. Responsiveness. Don't check your voicemail 3 days after you've seen that red light. We have all basically said, you get a phone message, it's important, right? It's not an email queuing up in your spam folder. Somebody needs to reach you. So to be responsive. Friendliness, building relationships, be friendly. People like to do business with people they like. Sincerity and collaboration. And one thing that, in terms of helping your clients, and one of the favorite things that all of Wendy and Sheila and Amy have said about, the end result of having a successful student. So in business, in private industry, it is seeing your clients become successful because they bought the product from you and now they're going gangbusters. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's That's a lot.
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes left, so I'll ask if there are any questions the students would like to ask. No? Oh. Hang on. Microphone. You need to be amplified, Ellen.
Hi, my name's Ellen. I guess any of you guys can really answer, but my question is that how often, if you guys at all now, how often do you penetrate new markets? And maybe what's like a brief overview of like your strategy for that, or an example of a previous strategy that you guys done for that?
I'll just say briefly that the strategy in the business that I'm in, a lot of leads come from word of mouth because it's a niche industry. So somebody may reach out and contact, and usually the email comes through the website and it says, "Dear Mr. Tully, please provide best price." That's it, right? So then you have to start from there to qualify. And it could be in a new market, but generally, if we're going into a new market, we want to try to qualify the lead, and then we hop on the Trade Commissioner service through Global Affairs Canada, because they can help us to realize a legitimate inquiry or not. So that's one path to take, okay?
Anybody else like to?
Big shout out for Trade Commissioner Service and our colleagues at Global Affairs and building personal relationships with those individuals. As I mentioned, our recent delegation to the Ukraine, that was a new market for most of our institutions, and we worked very closely with the staff at our embassy in Kiev, and then not letting those grow cold. So we were very lucky to both see the ambassador of Canada to Kiev in Winnipeg last week, and then he was here, so meet with him again here and his team. Then I asked him how close his relationship is with the Ukrainian's minister to Canada, and he laughed and he said he's actually at Peggy's Cove right now. I'm going to see him this afternoon for this Oceans event, because we wanted to get a message to him about the work we were doing, so we quick, rapid fire, put a kit together, wrote him a letter. I was on my way here, and one of my team went and delivered it to him at this event he was at. So just kind of like working all of your angles, and going down to my advice there is to just ask the question. And it's only recently, and I've been at this for quite some time, that I would feel comfortable just asking the question, like to ask the ambassador, "Hey, could you introduce me to the other ambassador colleague?" Even, a few years ago, I might have felt a little, not sheepish asking anyone, but sheepish asking a very senior individual. So yeah, just ask for help and introductions.
And on Wendy's note, I'm not that shy. We pay their wages, so.
Good for you. Time for one more.
I wanted to ask, is anyone here a bilingual, or do you have bilingual workers? Or if you don't, how would you break the language barrier with you and your clients, between you and your clients?
Yeah, I'm not. I studied French, Latin, and German at school, and I've tried to learn Spanish since, but yeah, I don't have a lot of free time to learn Spanish. I keep saying when I get older, I'm going to take 4 weeks and go and live down south and learn Spanish. But for us, we need to have people who speak the language. So right now, I have people in Vietnam. The person who's gone doesn't speak Vietnamese, but she speaks 3 other languages, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. And then we also have a recruiter who speaks Portuguese and Spanish. We also have people who speak other languages within our team. They don't necessarily recruit, but we can bring them in if we need to. When you talk to people about traveling, they always say, "Oh, if you've got someone who speaks the language, that would be ideal to send them." But I mean, in reality, you can't hire people who speak every single language. But if we were recruiting for a position and the 2 people looked exactly the same, if you had a couple of languages and someone else didn't, we'd hire you because we would need it. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
For us, it's definitely a bonus. So I am bilingual, and I do speak French and German, and I did study Latin in my master's. I can translate Latin documents for you. I know, it's exciting.
It's useful.
But we do identify having another language as an asset when, especially, it's relating to populations or with partners that we know we need it in. So we have a variety of languages in our office. In particular, there was one hire who we actually needed to have Mandarin skills because that person was really focused on the administration that came along with our Chinese partnerships. So that was critical. But you're right, certainly in an international setting, a second, third, fourth language, always a bonus because you never know what you're going to need. So when we're looking at applicants, we do look at other languages that they can bring to the table. And sometimes it's also unexpected, the context. So we talked about emerging markets or penetrating new markets. We recently signed a new agreement in the Philippines, for example, and it was helpful to create that relationship where we were able to identify a university that would be an appropriate partner to work with, partially because she did have linguistic or cultural background where she could help us create those relationships and form a good relationship with the Trade Commissioner in the Philippines.
Generally, in the commercial sector, the English is sort of recognized internationally, but we've had a couple of clients. One recent in our contract with the French Fire Brigade in Marseille, they absolutely stipulate that all of the training delivery services will be delivered in the French language. And if they are not, we will be monitored and we will be penalized. Now, fortunately, the founder of Survival Systems is a French-Canadian from Manitoba, and he's still, dilly-dallies around, so we'll get around it, and we do have a couple of languages inside the house. The other one was the Russians. Absolutely everything was in Russian, but you do deal. You figure it out. Lots of times our training manuals have to be translated, and it's not cheap. It's like $100,000 to translate these manuals, right? So, but anyway, yeah, there are challenges, but you find a way around them.
And very briefly for us, that we have Mandarin and Spanish capabilities in our office through hiring international student graduates, and we've been able to take on much more complex projects in China, as an example, because we have Austin on our team. Without him there, it's not that you can't work through a third party, you certainly can, but when you have very short timelines or you want to be able to do a lot of that work in-house, you really need the language capability.
Thank you. I really hate to cut this off because I think this is probably the best panel we've ever had. You said some wonderful answers, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And please, a round of applause for our panelists. Those of you who would like your Learning Passport stamp, Miriam is at the back of the room. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's not snowing.